Hey, book by book, I'm Richard Bewes. I'm thrilled to be with you. We are thrilled to be with you. Situated as we are in the Farm Fellowship, well, the barn of the Farm Fellowship near Preston. It's really Blackham territory where we are because Paul Blackham's family have been situated here for many years. And you can see the fruit and vegetables all around us. We're in a fruit and veg shop. It's wonderful. And here we are, Paul. Very glad to have you sharing again in this Bible study with us. And also Robbie, well, we call her Robbie. It's Robin Langford from Melbourne, who's, of course, an international ambassador for Christ and been in many, many different countries, joining us here in Preston. And what we're going to do is to take the second now in our series of studies in the book of James. In the New Testament, let me read, if I may, from we're still in chapter 1, let me start verse 19. My dear brothers, writes James, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. For man's anger does not bring about the righteous life that God desires. Therefore get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. This is quite a challenging little Bible study. Actually, Paul, do you detect a certain, linkage between what James is saying here and what Jesus was saying earlier?
Well, that's the wonderful thing, because particularly I like the idea that James is this brother of Jesus and had grown up and seen how Jesus lived and how with Jesus, how he puts this stuff into practice. That Jesus isn't just like giving philosophy, he's putting things into practice, and he's seen all this teaching of Jesus. And we see throughout the book of James, it's been called a kind of commentary on the Sermon on the Mount.
Maybe he was there, you see.
Maybe he was there and he was listening and he would have remembered. He maybe thought, I remember Jesus saying all this stuff as we grew up in the house. And you all the way through, and in our study guide that goes with this program, that you'll see a big list of all the teaching of Jesus and how it comes up and is quoted and alluded to by James. And we've already seen it in the way that, for instance, right at the beginning, consider it pure joy, my brothers, when you face trials of many kinds. Jesus says that, doesn't he, at the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount? Blessed are you when you're persecuted and suffering a hard time. He even says, jump for joy when that happens. And you think James is kind of recalling that stuff. And here, about dealing with anger, how Jesus says about don't be angry with people and don't sort of call them names and things when you're angry with them, because that's like murder. James is again picking up this thing about, get a grip of your anger. You can't let that get out of control because that's not going to bring about the righteous life that God requires. So, all the way through, as we're going through the book of James, we always should be really thinking, hang on a minute, what did Jesus say that is like this? Because basically that's what James is doing. He's taking that teaching of Jesus and applying it to us.
That anger bit is very important because, it says to me, watch your emails. You be careful about your emails. Just don't bang them off, and send them. We may get to 100 people or 1 million people in a very short time. Some irresponsible thing. So as we look on, though, at verse 22, James goes so far as to say that merely listening to the word rather than living it out is, he calls it, Robbie, he calls it deceiving ourselves. How is that?
Well, I think the crucial thing here is obedience. Jesus was asking for obedience, and as you were just saying about Jesus, and I think that James is asking for obedience here because you can listen and listen and listen. You can go to church all your life. You can listen to wonderful preaching. You can go to home groups and listen to Bible stories and Bible teaching, and you can listen to television programs or whatever. But if it doesn't go any further than that, then it's a dangerous deception because you are supposed to be doing it. You're supposed to be obeying. And you can be intellectually committed or believing as a Christian, but be on the road to hell. I mean, that was my own testimony as a young person in my early 20s. I had taken a decision to follow Jesus, and I believed it intellectually, and at the time it was communism, and if the communists had come in with their AK-47s and said, line up on the wall, all the Christians to be shot, I would have gone with the Christians. So I would have died for Jesus, but I was not living for Jesus. And to me, that is the crucial thing here. It's about obedience. I really was hell-bound. It was deceptive. All the listening. I was hearing it, but I wasn't doing it.
Oh my goodness. So there's three things, isn't it? It's hearers of the word, and then students of the word, and then obeying the word, doers of the word. And actually, I like verse 25, the man who looks intently into the perfect law. It's I think it's Alec Mattia, who in his little commentary here in the tests of faith on James, he says the word for looking intently is the same word used in the Greek as when Peter and John looked intently into the tomb of Jesus after he was risen. He said it couldn't just have been a cursory glance, oh, okay. They would have looked very carefully. Anything left here? What is here? You know, that's the kind of looking that he is on about. And that I think is maybe the challenge for us very much. As we look on at, true religion, I see the phrase there at the end of chapter 1. What, according to James Paul Blackham, theologian, what is true religion?
Well, it just follows right on from that, because religion, as it's generally understood in the world today, well, it's all kinds of things that aren't this doing of the words, the following the way of Jesus. You know, it's all about going on pilgrimages and wearing all kinds of clothes and rituals,
fastings,
all these things, and sort of saying, well, I'm going to church, I'm listening to the stuff, once a week. That's what it's all about. That's my religious stuff. And James just blasts it all out of the water. He's not really interested what the religion is supposed to be. And the religion of Christianity is just as false as any other religion, if it's just that. Because he's saying, look, it's worthless. It's a deception, all that religious stuff. Real religion, if we want to get to what is real religion or true religion, it's having this relationship with the living God and living as God lives, having that passion. So it's keeping oneself from being polluted by the world. And a lot of times that's as far as religion goes, like being anti-world and sort of, we want to be very pure. But the first thing he says, the religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: look after orphans and widows in their distress. And that's this wonderful thing that you think that's what the living God says he does in the scriptures. And you think to have that heart that says, look, look at Jesus. He's full of love. He's reaching out for me. He's helping people practically all the time. I just think that's wonderful to say, because that shows whether a person's really humble and broken and a heart full that's been changed. Do they love others? Are they helping people practically? That's when you begin to say, now here, this word and teaching of Jesus has not just stayed up here. It's gone down into the heart, and now it's actually issuing in a real life that makes a difference.
Actually, it's interesting that for James, his great model is Jesus Christ, because he says in chapter 2, as we come into there, my brothers as believers in our glorious Lord Jesus Christ. That's how he describes him. He's the model. And then as I look on in verses 1 to 7, I think, Robbie, we could reminisce for a minute as to what challenge does this passage bring to us. So really it's about favouritism, some of it anyway. Why is favouritism so incompatible with faith in Jesus Christ?
Well, faith in Jesus Christ infers that we want to be like Jesus and follow Jesus, to be godly and godlike. And if we're going to be like Jesus, then we need to do what he says and also to do as he did, because with Jesus, what he said and what he did were the same. Not, do as I say and not what I do. But Jesus himself was not partial to anybody. He was completely impartial. And his word, in his teaching, in his movements, in his healing, in his mixing with people, he dealt with every kind of person, men and women, the religious, the immoral, the Jew, the Gentile, the leper, the outcast, everybody, people who were ritually unclean and people who were clean, the Pharisees and, the woman who'd been bleeding, the unclean woman. He mixed with everybody and he treated them all the same. I mean, this is our perfect example. And his teaching was to love your neighbour as yourself. And if we look at in our church life, how do we do this? What's the challenge for us? How can we be impartial? After church, for example, do we always talk to the people who are like us, who are easy to talk to, who are our little clique, our little group, because we love them, we have fellowship with them, they're good friends. There's nothing against fellowshipping with our friends in Jesus, sisters and brothers in Jesus, but what about those who are different, who are lonely, who are a different race, a different colour, or whatever? I think for a church, this can be a challenge today, and how they treat the people who come through the doors.
Indeed. So, in the church at large around the world, there ought to be no such thing as class distinction in Britain, or caste distinction in India, or wealth distinction in the USA, perhaps, or tribal distinction in Africa. In the church, there ought to be none of that at all. It is indeed, as you say, Robbie, very challenging indeed for us.
And for rich churches and poor churches.
Yes.
You do get distinction in the poor churches as you do in the rich.
Yeah.
This is not kind of a virtue of the poor churches.
No. D.L. Moody
It is
was
a challenge to all of us.
Moody was once asked, the great evangelist of the 19th century, D.L. Moody, was asked, are you going to go and preach in Chicago to the miserable poor? He said, yes, and to the miserable rich too.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
all in need of saving.
all this speaks to us. Chapter 2, verse 8 I'm looking at. Let's continue with this Bible study. Here's James going on to comment on the law of the Old Testament, I see, and how showing favoritism actually breaks the law, he says. Yeah. Why mention the law here? What does James think about that, Paul?
Well, that's the thing. When the people might be like, well, I keep the law. I don't murder or something, or I don't commit adultery. He goes, but the law has a lot to say about treating people out, the poor, the widow, the orphan, caring for them. He's like, if you're going to just pick and choose which bits of the law you like and you don't like, just forget it. You've broken the law. You're a lawbreaker. He says, no, if you're going to, this law was pointing forward to this glorious way of the promised Messiah. And look at the prophets who've taken that law into themselves. Those prophets preach against favoritism, don't they? If you think about some of those Old Testament prophets, and they see the way that society will be segmented or compartmentalized into rich or landowners or things like that. And the prophets thunder against that. And he's saying, if you really care about the law, look at those prophets. Don't show any favoritism. Be on the side of of welcoming everybody, regardless of whether you think they're immoral or not immoral, or wealthy or not wealthy. Just everyone who comes into a Christian community should feel welcome, regardless of their background, regardless of their religious or morality background or anything like that. They should feel welcome.
Didn't you like verse 10 where it says, whoever keeps the whole law and yet stumbles at just one point is guilty of the lot?
It's powerful that. It prevents that picking and choosing.
I suppose we're like tightrope walkers, we're wanting to do the best and keeping the law for the Lord as our response for all that he's done for us. We're like tightrope walkers, and we've only got to fall off once, and we've broken all the law. It is challenging, very much so. Looking on at verse 13. Oh, Robbie, how much mercy does a person have to show before they receive mercy on Judgment Day? Because it says there, speak and act as those who are going to be judged by the law that gives freedom, because judgment without mercy will be shown to anyone who has not been merciful. Mercy triumphs over judgment. Would you like to... What is he on about there?
Well, difficult to find a quantity. How much?
Yes,
how
exactly.
much? To me, immediately it smacks of that parable of Jesus, of the unmerciful servant who was forgiven, $1 billion and was very grateful to the king, and then went out and grabbed his fellow debtor by the neck and said, give me back the $5 you owe me, or whatever. And he was cast into eternal punishment, or more or less the equivalent of it. And another time when Jesus said, one of the disciples asked him, how often should we forgive somebody? And he said 7 times, and Jesus said, no, 70 times 7 as a kind of, mythical number. You never stop forgiving. Yeah. Our own debt is huge. When I think of my own debt, as I say, before I was living for the Lord, it was enormous. I remember the relief of Jesus' forgiveness. Our debt is uncountable. It's unending because we sin every day and we're asking for forgiveness. So we have an uncountable debt, and we're forgiven that. So then our mercy should be without limit. is what I feel. That's the only way I can quantify it. Because mercy, we've been given unlimited mercy. Therefore, our mercy should be unlimited, yes.
I find that very helpful, what you say. I mean, actually, of course, this whole passage here that we've been looking at is about doers of the word. It's been saying, really, that if there's a real engagement with God's word, the proof will be seen in, well, the words we're speaking, that was verse 19 to 21. The things we're doing, that was verse 22 onwards. And then ultimately the person we are becoming. That is vital. As we round off, I think of the words of, well, he was from Argentina, where you've been. Luis Palau, the preacher there, he once said in a television interview, he said, it's either back to the Bible or back to the jungle. It's one or other. Let's come back again for another study before too long. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.